RM Sotheby's is the world's largest collector car auction house by total sales. They are the preeminent market maker of high-quality collector cars and collections, regardless of size or complexity. By working in partnership with the Sotheby's team and its network of 80 offices in 40 countries, RM Sotheby's has established the largest client network of any collector car auction house in the world. Join the RM Sotheby's family by connecting with one of their car specialists at rmsotheby's.com or contact me directly at gstanley@rmsotheby's.com. LLC TLC is here to save you money on all of your vehicle purchases. LLC TLC will permanently register your classic cars in Montana to avoid any annual renewal fees. As your registered agent, they will handle everything for you so you never have to step foot in Montana. And as a listener of this podcast, LLC TLC is offering 30% off your entire package. Simply go to llctlc.com/classic or mention this podcast when you contact LLC TLC directly. All right, welcome to the Collector Car Podcast. I'm very excited about this episode here because we're talking about the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals with Bob Ashton. Bob, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great.
I appreciate you being on. I'm super excited for numerous reasons, and we can dive into a bunch of stuff here. The main reason I'm excited, well, two reasons. So first reason is your show, in my mind, is like the best muscle car Corvette show in the country. And I've been blown away by the cars that you get for that show. And then the second reason I'm so excited is for the second time in my life, I'm actually showing a car at a show. You were graciously to accept my 66 Pontiac GTO as part of the Pontiac Invitational. So real quick, tell us about the show and then we'll dig into a little deeper.
Well, there's so much. And I want to say thanks for letting me be on here. I was just mentioning, I was looking at some of your past episodes and that. So I feel I'm in pretty elite company here. You've had some great guests over the years, and so I'm very honored. But with that being said, I could go on and on about the show. We just have so much going on. I mean, I'm a guy who's living my dream. I'd always had the dream of producing a high-end muscle car specific show, and that's what I'm doing. Here we are 16 years later, going into our 15th show, and there's just so much going on. It's really an exciting thing to be able to do what I do.
Yeah, and what I find so interesting about it is it's not just another car show, and it's the curation of incredible cars that you hear about, but then you show up and it's not like, well, there's one of them there. There's like four of them there. I mean, it's just unbelievable what you get. And like, is your network just so deep and strong that you're able to find all these cars? I mean, how do you find these cars?
Well, I have to give some credit to my partners. Now, of course, I'm the face of the show. I'm the managing member. I run the thing. My wife and I do 99.9% of the work, I would say. But I have 7 partners. And when we put the group together back in 2009, each of my partners, you could say that they have specific interests or specific areas of interest. Colin Comer, who I'm sure you know, who's big in the Shelby and Mustang world. Stefano Bimby is the CEO of Nicky Chicago. Charlie Lillard from out in California is huge in mostly GM, but a little bit of everything. I mean, he's got a Porsche and he's got a new Lucid Air that I had the pleasure of having a run in recently. Each one of the guys has a real passion in a specific part of the hobby, which in turn means they know a lot of people in whatever that area is. So when we started out, the goal was to get people to show their cars that are rarely and in some cases never shown to the public. And these guys know who to call. So we have specific, we call them invitational displays that we change every year. And because of my partnership with the guys, I can say, okay, we're going to do a Shelby display this year. And I can go to Colin and say, okay, I need a couple of GT40s. So instead of me just randomly calling somebody who may own a GT40, he can say, I know exactly who we need to call. So I guess you could say it's almost like a peer pressure thing. It's like the guys will call up, they'll open the door and say, hey, my partner Bob's going to call you. He runs our show. We need your GT40 for the show in November. And lo and behold, next thing we've got, a row of Hemi Cuda convertibles or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and what I also love is probably my favorite display is the barn find display, because you see stuff that's been dragged out and usually it's really rare stuff. And I go out to a lot of Concours events, and I think the Concours events are really missing out because that is so exciting to see something. You see the potential of the car. You see in a situation, it's for the dreamers. It's like, well, I can never afford a 65, Shelby GT350, but what if I came across one that's covered in dust and partially wrecked and in a garage and for sale at an estate sale for 20 grand? Like it fuels the dreams. And I feel like you really capitalized on that by just having some incredible cars such as that. Is that a pretty big goal of yours every year to have the barn find display?
It is, and we really emphasize fun. So of course we do very, very intense judging, but we don't force anybody to do anything. And the barn find, the whole concept of that is just to have some fun. And fortunately, as you know, there are a lot of cars out there. People say, well, what are you going to do when you run out? Well, every year, more and more things come to the surface. And I think with the barn finds, when we started doing that, people realize that car that's sitting out in the field, there really are people that may be interested in seeing it. So that kind of opened the door and expanded in a rapid way. And one of my most rewarding aspects of our job is when we get somebody to bring a car in as a barn find. We tell them, don't wash it, don't clean it, air up the tires so we can push it in, but that's all. We don't want to see it, the running or anything like that. But when it comes back a couple years later, fully restored, and it's one of our premier unveiling cars. So that's a pattern that's been happening the last 5 or 6 years. And I think we have 3 of them this year that were previously shown as barn finds that have come back fully restored. So it's kind of like inspiration for some of the owners to do something with a car that they're, I'm going to get to it someday, or I'm going to restore it someday. Well, sometimes that's just the right push to get somebody to actually do something and bring these cars back out and bring them back to life.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. And it's so neat because you can kind of see there's a story in those cars as they sit, whether it was wrecked or something fell on it, or something caused it to not be driven for a while and just came into disrepair. Yeah, that is very, very cool. Now let's go over some of the invitational categories, because I know obviously the Pontiac GTOs, I'm excited about it. You accepted my car to the red carpet invitational, and I love that because it's gold with a one-off red pinstripe and red fender wells and red, has some red accents. I love the fact that it's going to be on a red carpet. But tell us a little bit more about those different classes that you've created for the show.
Yeah, we change them up every year, and the whole intent of that is to keep the show fresh and, as I say, unexpected. So I actually rotate between the big 3 for what's become known as the red carpet display, which is what you see when you first come into the show. We run a red carpet down the center, and then it's flanked by 2 rows of cars. And this year, that happens to be GTO. So we're commemorating the anniversary year of 1964 being the launch of the GTO. In this display, it came together just beyond my dreams, I would say, because on the right side, we have a historical timeline. We start out in the front with Tenny Fairchild's 64 Royal Bobcat, which it is the car that was on the cover of Car and Driver, the car that they tested back then.
I guess the Ferrari, not the Ferrari GTO competition, but the original launch.
The GTO, the Pontiac GTO, that was, and we did try to get the Ferrari GTO. I should have called you on that to get some help. We actually had a few leads on doing that. That was our original intent. But the 64 GTO, that was used by Jim Wangers and prepped by Pontiac Engineering. That exact car, which also has kind of a fun little backstory. So the owner, who's Tenny Fairchild out in California, when he was 4 years old, his father worked for the advertising agency. Jim Wangers took Tenny for a ride in that car at 4 years old, and he never forgot it. He vowed that one day he would own that car. And about 15 years ago, that dream became reality, and he owns it to this day.
Oh, that's amazing.
And that leads to our theme displays. There's a story on every one of these cars. So it's neat in a case like this where you could put together a group of GTOs, but every single GTO in this group has a backstory. And we know this one guy from Ohio that has a 66 unrestored car that's gold and recently on Jay Leno's Garage. Again, great story. I mean, the background and the research that you did and the way you ended up with the car. This is what we really like to promote, is the fact that we want our participants and our spectators to come and look at a car that they love and talk to that owner. Go and say, hey, that's that guy I saw in Jay Leno, so let's hear about that car, and so that you can share that story. Because I call our show the Great Equalizer. And the reason I do that is because you could be a multimillionaire with a building full of cars. When you come through the door at our show, nobody knows that, but you might be talking to the guy in the elevator and you find out he's got a room full of Hemi cars. It's kind of like you check your ego at the door.
Yeah.
And whether you're an enthusiast with a $5,000 car, you have a room full of Hemis. It's all leveled there, and we want to hear and have you share those stories with everyone.
Yeah, that's really, really great. Well, what are some of the other invitational classes you have, or different classes you have? I see, I'm in the car world every day, and you have this is looking back, but an example of a car that you never see. Last year you had the Bronco Boss.
Right.
Do you have a class like that where it's kind of like, okay, I've heard about Broncos forever, but I didn't know about this version. Do you have something like that as far as an invitational class for 2024?
Nothing that's Bronco specific, although I do have a couple of Broncos in the show. We've got an unrestored original in our vintage certification program this year. I think it has 4,200 miles coming out of Colorado. So keeping things diverse and interesting, because as much as we may love seeing a row of 427, 435 Corvettes, it's neat to look at the other side of the building and see a supercharged Studebaker.
Right.
We call it Studebaker Legends, which is a display that's put together by our good friend Ed George. And every year he comes up with just a spectacular group of Studebakers. And this year, thanks to the Studebaker Museum, we have the 1933 Indianapolis race car that Studebaker campaigned, the actual car. So, again, something out of the ordinary, unexpected, but boy, is it ever neat to see. Mopar fans are going to be real happy. We've got the final stop of the A12 reunion tour. So they went to Carlisle and they went up to New Hamburg, Ontario. And this is the last stop. So we have nearly 24 A12, which is a 446 pack and 446 barrel Roadrunners and Super Bs.
Wow.
We have an evolution of the 426 Hemi display, which is, we do start out with a 64. So we've got 64 to 71. We've got our Mustang Pinnacle judging program, which is for the absolute best Mustangs. We have Shelbys and Mustangs, several Boss 429s in that group. We started to talk earlier about a gentleman that I was turned on to by the name of Hunt Palmer Ball. We have him joining us with a 67 Shelby GT 500 with, again, a great story. And to summarize it, I'll give you a few tidbits about it. But
Sure.
He bought this car when he was working in the parts department of a Ford Shelby dealer back in the day as a teenager. And Carroll Shelby himself caught wind of this kid had worked hard and saved up some money, was actually able to place a special order for the 67 GT 500. So lo and behold, Mr. Shelby decided he was going to add a few extra parts that he personally put in the trunk of this car, some good old Shelby performance goodies. Car arrived at the dealership. The new owner had not seen the car yet, but of course the staff is all excited and they looked. The owner of the dealership happened to be looking at the car. They opened up the trunk and found it was full of Shelby parts. Owner assumed this young man was stealing parts.
Oh, wow.
Called him into the office to fire him. He had no idea what was in the trunk. He knew nothing of it. He happened to be a friend of Carroll Shelby, so he called him and he says, hey, this car for this kid, he's stealing parts and all that. And Carroll's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean he's stealing parts? I opened up the trunk and it's got a dual 4 intake and it's got this. And he laughs and says, that was a little extra gift that I sent for him.
Wow. That's
true
really
story, and he owns the car to this day. It's been fully restored, and he'll be joining us. He's going to do a panel discussion talk with Colin Comer, and also Gary Patterson from Shelby is joining us from Las Vegas. So we're going to talk Shelby on Saturday afternoon with those guys as one of our panel discussions.
So what's the base Mustang that those parts were in the trunk of?
Say again, I'm sorry.
What Hunt Palmer, his car, what was it? Was it a coupe, a convertible, a
No,
fastback?
it's a GT500 fastback.
Okay. All right. So he had some extra goodies in the trunk when he got the car.
Correct.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. That's amazing because I actually saw a car the other day. It was not the same story, but one similar. The guy bought a hypo fastback, a white hypo fastback, and he couldn't afford the Shelby, but he bought a bunch of parts over the counter at the dealer, and he
Right.
put them on the car. And so it looks like someone's trying to make a Shelby, but it's not quite right. But the parts have been on the car since '65.
That's
So I'm like,
great.
okay, well, I can live with it not being quite right in that scenario.
Absolutely. But we have another gentleman that I spoke to this week, purchased his 66 GT350 when he was 19 years old, who's joining us. And again, he's owned it since then.
Wow.
Obviously, he's a little older now, but those are the people you want to talk to. That's hearing it from the source, as I say, is always fun. And of course, the people that were there, they love to share the stories. So we really spotlight that opportunity to people to say, hey, jump in there and talk to these people. It's great to be part of the community.
Yeah, and I love one of your invitationals, the Malays era. Tell us about that.
Yes. Well, that was something we were doing a little bit of experimentation with a few years ago. And one of our staff members had a 1978 Dodge Magnum, a beautiful car. He had just acquired it, and it was kind of funny because he had several e-bodies, and he was, I don't want to say embarrassed, but it was like, yeah, I bought this car. And it's like, well, what'd you get, Brad? And he says, oh, yeah, it's a Magnum, kind of like looking down. It's like, I had a Magnum brand new back then. So I'm like, oh, tell me more. I love those cars. Long story short, we get to talking about it, and it's like, what would be fun would be to put together a group of those cars. Um, and obviously, I'm thinking it's going to appeal to a younger demographic because, this is a new part of the hobby, or there's a lot of people that are able to enter the hobby because they're buying 70s or early 80s collector cars. And while they obviously don't have the horsepower that we love from 1969, I have to love the graphics and they're just fun cars. We all know they're not fast, but that's irrelevant. They're just good fun cars. So we had put together a mixed make group of Malays era cars, and it was a huge hit. So last year we kind of changed it up a little bit, and then again this year we're doing the focus on the F body cars, so the Firebirds and Camaros, and kind of building it around a 1981 Turbo Z Yenko Camaro.
Oh, wow.
Which,
Yeah.
again, a car that a lot of people don't know exists, but it was a real, Don Yenko built those cars. He was grasping, he was trying to kick performance in the rear a little bit in 1981. And a good friend of ours out of Florida, Ryan Snyder, has just a beautiful example, and that'll be the centerpiece of that display, along with some, I think we range from 74 to 87 on that for a couple of IROC Zs, and obviously Trans Ams, and there's some great cars in there that I think will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Mustangs, Fox bodies. I was going to ask you, I understand starting in 74, why end in 87? Is there a particular car? I mean, you can make the argument, it's not a muscle car, but you can make the argument like the F40, Ferrari F40 just blew everybody's doors off. You had Lamborghinis performing, you had Porsches performing, you had Fox body Mustangs hitting 230 horsepower, I think in 87. Was there a particular car, or was it a group of cars that you said, you know what, we're going to cut it off at 87?
Yeah, basically the Buick Grand National and the Monte Carlo SS. That would be kind of why I extended it, because I think a lot of people think of that era as ending at 81 or 82. But for me, I don't think there's any black and white definition of what that is. So for me, I extended it out because of the Grand National and the GNXs. And that kind of leads to another display. We have a gentleman who has been coordinating special displays for us that are Buick themed for the last 5 or 6 years, and he changes the theme every year. So his primary theme is 68 and 69 GS Stage 1s. But again, there we're talking about the newer cars and how there's interest in Grand Nationals and GNXs. So he managed to come up with 4 GNXs that are all something super special. So you would probably know of the X-Ray GNX.
No, I don't.
It is the only factory-built GNX that is white.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was actually built by Buick. We have a 86 GNX pre-production pilot car. And again, just four cars, just four GNXs, but they're all something very special. They're unique one-off cars. So that'll be part of our Buick display along with the 68 and 69 GS Stage 1s.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, have you ever had a Chevy Citation X11 in your display?
We did not. And that was a car that was on our Malaise era muscle. I call it my hit list.
That's a deep
And
cut.
Brad was coordinating that. He actually found one in the Chicago area that was beautiful, but for whatever reason, we couldn't get the owner to join us. So we did have a 79 Turbo Buick Century, which is
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
close, same
Right.
body, X body. So, but no, I haven't been able to convince the owner of a Mint Citation X11 to join us.
We had two Citations when I was of age to learn how to drive, and they were not great cars, but obviously when you see one after 30 years, you have fond memories. And I remember that was the upgrade, which I think the upgrade was basically a sticker package that actually slowed the car down, probably. So,
Well, and I'll throw this out here since we're on this crazy what if. Did you know that in 1984 they made a CUDA? Chrysler
no,
produced a CUDA. They actually
really.
built two of them, and it was to be an answer to the Shelby Charger for the Chrysler Plymouth dealer. So they did build two of them. They built a red one, they built a white one. The red one is said to have been donated to a school and was allegedly destroyed, although we can't confirm that. The white one was purchased by an employee from Chrysler, and that car is now owned by that gentleman's son.
Oh,
That
wow.
car we will have at the show. So again, people are going to look at it, and I think because of the type of show that we are, when they see something like that, most people who are familiar with what we do go, "That's not just an old Horizon. There's something going on here. Why is this car here?" And then you find out this is one of the actual, I guess you'd call it a pilot or pre-production car, Plymouth Cuda for 1983 or 4, I believe.
Well, we could go deep into the Malaise era. I probably should wrap it up, but I do want to mention one car that I am trying to find. Maybe you can help me out here. Apparently, there was one 1982 Ford LTD built out of carbon fiber. And my father-in-law was on that team that built it. And I've been trying to find that thing because can you imagine a carbon fiber 1982 Ford LTD?
That's
It was kind
incredible. Yeah.
of, the feasibility study for carbon fiber and production cars. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if you had the only 82 LTD made of carbon fiber, imagine rolling into the local car cruise then with that sucker.
And you have to wonder what were they thinking at that time.
Right.
If you're going to build something out of carbon fiber, which at that time I imagine was millions of dollars to do a car
Yeah.
like that,
It was all hand
and
done
you're
at
going to
that
do it
point.
with an LTD, you wouldn't do it with a Mustang or a Capri.
Maybe
That's
they
what keeps
had
it
big
interesting.
flat panels they could work with.
Yeah, that's true. Very true. Very
Maybe
true.
that's why. All right. Is there anything else you would like to mention? Because I could continue talking forever.
Well, obviously, in the name, we've been known as the muscle car. Well, Drew Harden from Muscle Car Review called us the center of the muscle car universe, which I took great pride in when they printed that years ago. Of course, we also have Corvette in the name, and which can be a little deceiving because there was a Chevy and Corvette specialty show before we existed, and we are not that, but because of our affiliation with the Corvette, we're able to have the absolute best of the best. And we do what's called a triple diamond certification and judging program. We have our largest field with 56 cars competing for triple diamond. And what that is, you have to achieve NCRS Top Flight and Bloomington Gold in advance of applying for triple diamond status. So it really is the best of the best. So this year we have 56 competitors. They range in age from 1954 to 2003 with 11 C1s, which is, that in itself is just a sight to see. Just the absolute best of the best in restored Corvettes of that era from 54 on up. It's really, I'm excited about it. We've got, I don't know, 5 or 6 L88s. I've got a L89
Wow.
coming in with that join us from California. another neat thing on the side, just as we wrap things up, this is the first year we've had a participant ship cars into us from Hawaii. So
Wow.
a gentleman who has 3 black Mopars, multi-car Mopars that are coming in from Hawaii. We also have a competitor in our Triple Diamond certification program whose car is coming in from Germany. I understand it hit the docks in California this past week. So exciting for us to have, we can say we're truly an international event. So this is the opportunity for people to see cars they may never get a chance to see again. And we get such tremendous support from our participants that as you can see, I'm really excited about it again. It's going to be a great year.
Yeah, and just to recap, I do want to end on a controversy here. But before we get to the controversy, it's November the 23rd and 24th, the Donald E. Stevenson Convention Center in Chicago. You can go to macacn.com, MCACN.com. So
Yes.
the controversy, why are Mustangs and Shelbys allowed in the muscle car and Corvette show?
Same reason we allow Corvettes.
Well, because I got beat up years ago because I called a Mustang a muscle car. I know they're pony cars, but at one point, all right, so if a 340 AAR Mopar is a muscle car, why is a hypo fastback not? And then I'm like, all right, 67 Mustang 390s, definitely a muscle car. 428 Cobra Jet, definitely a muscle car. So how do you put pony cars into, how do you define them in the muscle car world?
For us, anything that has too much horsepower for the weight of the car, I think that would kind of summarize how we look at it.
Okay,
so whether
if you can
it's
do burnout, you're in.
a Mustang, but then if you really want to get into a controversial conversation, and we're going to really heat it up this year, is the GTO conversation. Is that the first muscle car?
Right. Yes.
So let me introduce you to our Studebaker folks who will tell you all about when John DeLorean worked at Studebaker and was putting superchargers on Studebakers long before there was ever the dream of a GTO.
Yeah, and I remember on my interview with Leno, that was one of the first things he said. He's like, I know a lot of people think that another was the first, but this is the true muscle car. I think he even referenced the Delta 88 from like 56 or something, 55 or 66. And I think his point was the first mass-produced, mass-accepted, maybe mainstream kind of car to be called the muscle car. I don't know. What's your opinion?
Well, I think you can go a long way with the GTO argument because they actually produced that car with the intent to make a low dollar car with a lot of power to appeal to a young male buyer who had some money in his pocket after going to war. So I think there's a strong argument for that. But as I said, I'm known as a Mopar guy. So what am I going to say? A 55 Chrysler 300? Maybe that. A Buick guy is going to tell us, well, look at a Buick Century. That was really, I would consider that to be the first car that really took a large engine and put it in a smaller body. So to me, as much of a Mopar guy as I am, I would say that Buick was really the first example of a quote muscle car. But there's a lot of people who might say otherwise.
Yeah. Well, Bob, thank you so much for your time on the Collector Car Podcast. I can't wait to see you in November, and we'll look at all these cool cars together.
We'll have fun. There'll be so much to see. I just tell people, wear comfortable shoes and plan on spending as much time as you can. Meet the owners, interact, and have a blast.